In this video, we will look at how much practice per week is optimal to retain a skill and what are the optimum breaks between blocks of practice. But there's very little research done on breaks between practice, or practice days if you like. This is referred to as spaced practice. But there is a lot of research done on rest periods between blocks of practice within one day's session. Historically, much more research effort has been placed on the study of performance to rest ratios within practice sessions rather than the breaks between different practice sessions, which is termed spaced practice. Let's look at spaced practice first. Typically, researchers have described practice sessions as being massed or distributed. Massed means minimal rest between performance attempts, and distributed is more rest between attempts. Well, in 1994, Bjork, no, not the singer, the researcher, found less spacing between sessions and shorter sessions in general are better due to learners losing interest less and maintaining higher motivation, but gave no specifics. We can, however, use research on intensity to give us an answer. And at the end of this video, I'll give you a suggestion as to how you can find your own best path forward. Grohr in 1968 experimented with practice to rest ratios using a stabilometer test and also the Bachmann ladder test. What he found was, using the Bachmann ladder test, that 30% of the practice session time should be spent on practicing and 70% should be on rest. Now, when he did the stabilometer tests, he found 57% of the time could be spent practicing and 43% of the time on rest. And the differences between these two tasks is intensity. What this also showed is that there is no single work to rest ratio or practice to rest ratio, if you like, that is applicable across all activities or all tasks. We have to find it. I've said many times before, when we're working with practice and we're talking about intensity, we should always go for quality over quantity. Please write that down. I'll give you examples showing different types of intensity. For example, throwing darts would be low level intensity, and therefore you could spend more time of your practice session throwing darts and less time resting. However, hitting a punch bag, for example, is higher intensity, and therefore you would need to spend more time resting. You would need to spend more time resting if you're doing a punch bag as opposed to throwing darts. Another example, sprinting is very high intensity, so longer rest periods are needed than time spent sprinting itself. An important thing we need to consider as well is the level of fitness of the participant. If the participant has a low level of fitness specific to the activity that they are going to be participating in, then they will be able to do less practices before fatigue sets in. You've heard me say this before, fatigue is the enemy of good technique. So once again, we come back to quality over quantity, and that will depend on how intense the activity is. Baddeley and Longman in 1978 found that there is an upper limit to the amount of practice that can be done in one day. And again, this is dependent on intensity. And they found that shorter sessions spread out more are more effective than longer sessions bunched up together like this. Recent research from Stanford University has shown that in any given session, we should attempt to do as many practice attempts as we possibly can. Basically, what they're saying is, don't muck about. Get on with your practice when you're doing practicing. And that makes an awful lot of sense. I want to go back to a term that I've mentioned many times before, which is blocked practice. Blocked practice is a practice sequence where individuals rehearse the same skill repeatedly. For example, 10 repetitions of a javelin throw, or, to use the earlier example, 10 dart throws, or on a punch bag, 10 repetitions of throwing a jab. Rests are then given between each block of practice. This then allows us to count up how many blocks of practice a person is doing within any given time. Now, what the coach can then do is they can then monitor how many repetitions are done before fatigue sets in, basically when technique starts to suffer. So let's say, for example, I'm throwing punches onto the punch bag and I can do 10 blocks of 10, 100 repetitions before my technique starts to suffer. Then I know that a session should be approximately 100 repetitions of that technique. As my fitness improves, that is going to go up. But it's better to assess than it is to guess. So we write these things down. I want to go back to something that I've mentioned before in previous videos. It's really important in between blocks of practice that you do nothing, absolutely nothing. So practice 10 punches and rest and do nothing for 20 to 30 seconds. Don't pick up your phone, don't talk to your mates, don't do anything, nothing. We've introduced this with the sprints group that I coach. They will do their drills, their warm-up drills, which are technique drills. And in between, when they used to come in and sit on their phones for a couple of minutes, none of that now. And the standard of the drills has gone up immeasurably. It is so much better because it's during these 20 to 30 second periods of rest that the learning is occurring. This is when the brain is rewiring, to use that term neuroplasticity that everybody loves. Yes, that's when that is occurring. The learning is done during the rest period. And I've mentioned this before, when you are resting, it is played backwards in your mind, and then later on, it is played forwards in your mind in your sleep. So that brings me to the next point. Practice is nothing without good quality sleep. Make sure you get good quality sleep. Write that one down. I've designed a practice tracker, which is part of the course that you can find below in the description. So click that, and then you'll need to sign up to get the thing, and then you'll be able to get that practice tracker, and that has blocks of practice, it has discrete blocks of practice, randomized blocks of practice, which is part of a different video, but you'll be able to use that practice tracker to monitor exactly how many repetitions of a technique you are doing before that fatigue sets in, and you can be that a little bit more precise about your practice. Unfortunately, this is something that you are going to have to experiment with yourself in your sport or your activity in order to find the right result for you as an individual. There is not one answer on how much rest there should be between sessions. I would make a suggestion, and this goes into something that I've explored in my periodization course. The link for that is below as well if you'd like to get that. It's virtually impossible to actually nail your training every single day of the week. In fact, as I've said many times, you should be aiming to nail your training once per week. If you can do that, you've done it. It's also pretty much impossible for you to train hard every single day. So if the repetitions that you're practicing are of high intensity, do it one day, rest the next. Do it another day, rest the next. Do it another day, rest the next. And I think that that is going to be an awful lot better for you because you cannot do more than 2 hard days in a row when you're training relative to your own level of fitness. So unfortunately, there isn't one single precise answer. Science does not give us one precise answer. It's a case of we have to test this and practice this ourselves. Get the practice tracker below and you can make a start with that, and the very best of luck.